I'd like to introduce my good friend Dr. Victoria Sublette from the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds, who will speak about what's happened since that Four Corners expose 5 years ago, and also what more you can do to help.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming today. I think it's really important we're here to support each other. So as Shay said, I'm Dr. Victoria Sublette from the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds. What we are is a national anti-racing activist organization. So what we do is we research the statistics of greyhound racing, and then we use various forms of national media to expose the cruelty and corruption of greyhound racing to the public, as well as we lobby the government to shut down the greyhound racing industry. So what I'm going to tell you about in about the next 9 minutes is what happened in the past 4 years since the greyhound racing industry promised to clean up its act. I'll provide the evidence of this industry's cruelty and give you the facts on why greyhound racing is unsustainable and needs to be shut down. The greyhound racing industry is designed for gambling on dogs. It's an industry with a horrendous track record of animal welfare. The less money spent on a dog's health and well-being, such as high-quality food, veterinary care, comfortable beds, or even toys to play with during the 23 hours a day they're sitting in a cage, the more money the owners pocket. It's simple math. The less money paid out, the more they profit. However, as Shay just mentioned, the cruelty doesn't just affect the dogs, as we saw in the Four Corners expose in 2015. In that expose, Australians were shocked by footage of live rabbits and possums tortured and being ripped to pieces in order to live bait the greyhounds. And this is a practice that was banned in 1967. After the expose and many reports of industry cruelty, the Honourable Michael McHugh was appointed to investigate the New South Wales greyhound racing industry. The findings in his 2016 reports raised serious questions about whether the industry should be allowed to continue. The report described the overwhelming evidence and systemic animal cruelty, including the mass killing of greyhounds, the widespread practice of live baiting, injuries, and mistreatment of the dogs. McHugh reported an estimation of between 48,891 and 68,448. That's between 48,000 and 68,000 dogs that had been killed unnecessarily for the past 12 years because they were too slow to pay their way or unsuitable for racing. Well, an internal Greyhounds Australasia report revealed that greyhound racing was responsible for the deaths of 17,000 healthy greyhounds every year. The evidence was so incriminating and sickening that Mike Baird, the New South Wales Premier at that time, put a greyhound racing ban in place for the following year in New South Wales. When announcing the ban, he was quoted as saying, "Certainly this is not an easy decision. It's not something that has been taken lightly. But when confronted with Justice McHugh's report, I believe there is no other alternative." However, as most of you know, within 3 months of this announcement, Premier Baird succumbed to political pressure and reversed the ban. In so doing, Baird gave into an industry that promised to reform and claimed that they just needed one more chance to clean it up. Official inquiries in Victoria and Queensland around the same time also concluded that the greyhound racing industry in those states deserved another chance to reform. So, 4 years after the backflip, has the greyhound racing industry reformed? No. This is what the industry has done with that chance that they were given. 2 years ago, the New South Wales Greyhound Racing Injury Report for the first quarter, 37 dogs died and 109 were injured. The second quarter report revealed that 1 in every 7 dogs who raced were injured on track, and a greyhound died on a New South Wales track every 3 days. 3 years ago, the Queensland Racing Integrity Commission, the QRIC, first annual report failed to report on the most basic information, including the number of pups bred, dogs raced, and greyhounds who were injured or who had died on the track. Also 3 years ago, Greyhound Racing New South Wales tested about 8,100 dogs for prohibited substances and found 77 positive results for methamphetamine, amphetamine, human growth hormones, and arsenic. Currently in Victoria, 3 dogs are killed per day because they don't qualify for racing. And thousands of greyhounds are still going missing every year. Greyhounds are massively overbred and then disposed of if they aren't fast enough to win or when they get old or injured. From our research gleaned from the stewards' reports, about 4,000 greyhounds were unaccounted for in 2017-18 and a similar amount in 2018-19. We assume that they were killed as wastage, an industry term for the dogs they dispose of. That's 4,000 dogs killed every year, and their killers are getting away with it. For this reason, the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds is demanding that state governments implement whole-of-life tracking. These racing people shouldn't be allowed to get away with murder. Speaking of murder, 2 years ago, there was a grisly finding of emaciated, diseased, and dead greyhounds in a mass grave in Western Sydney on the property of a licensed trainer. The mass graveyards aren't new. In 2016, 100 greyhounds were found in a mass grave in New South Wales, and in 2015, 55 dead greyhounds were found in a mass grave in Queensland after being brutally killed. Just as recent as this last November 2019, to the tune of the dog racers' catch cry, "We love our dogs," comes the horrific news of a man in Dubbo, New South Wales, who was convicted of animal cruelty after finding he neglected and purposely starved his racing greyhounds to death. And on the same day, 3 Victorian greyhound trainers were suspended for using live possums as live bait for their racing greyhounds. So as of today, the latest stats we have, in Queensland alone, there were 1,174 injuries and 64 greyhounds euthanized on track. Sorry, that was last year. That's an average of 5.3 dogs killed each month. 5.3 dogs every month. And this year in Queensland, so far, 8 greyhounds have died on the track, 4 of them right here in Ipswich, with a total of 36 dogs killed Australia-wide, and it's only February. So would all these facts be enough to ban this corrupt and cruel industry? Apparently not. In fact, just the opposite. The government is actually boosting the industry. New South Wales just held the taxpayer-funded $1 million chase, with prizes equaling $1.7 million. And now, to literally add insult to injury, the Palaszczuk government is proposing this $40 million track. So given the powerful evidence, including economic failings, the harms of gambling, and exposure of cruelty to racing animals, it is completely irresponsible that this racetrack is even being considered. Even more irresponsible is that track safety recommendations have been ignored. Racing propaganda relating to new tracks argues that they'll be the safest tracks ever built, but the design is not in line with research conducted by the University of Technology, Sydney, which recommends straight tracks and only 6 dogs per track. Such a design would minimize, and also using longer arm lures so they're more in the center of the track. So this design would minimize the risks of the dogs becoming injured as a consequence of crowding together and bashing into each other around the turns. These recommendations have all been ignored. The government is also ignoring human welfare. Australia has one of the highest rates of gambling in the world. Gambling is a significant public health issue. Between 80,000 and 160,000 Australian adults experience significant problems with gambling. Shockingly, children are a new target for the racing industry as it hosts family fun days, which promote gambling on dogs as an appropriate and fun activity for children. Despite the danger of children witnessing the all too common injuries and on-track euthanasia, these colorful promotions encourage children to be the next generation of problem gamblers. Australia is currently only one of 7 countries in the world that race greyhounds commercially. And instead of listening to public outcry, as in America, where greyhound racing tracks are closing down, the Australian government is turning a deaf ear to the Australian voice by using taxpayer funds to prop up a dying, cruel, and harmful industry. So, what's in the future for Australia? What's in the future for Oz? Are we still the lucky country? Well, not everyone is so lucky. With the support of the government, Australia is becoming a nation of problem gamblers who turn a blind eye to animal cruelty. The racing industry preys on the most vulnerable in our society: animals, children, and those with addiction issues. Let it fall over there. Thank you. Last one. Okay, so now you know what the industry has done with their last chance. They have continued overbreeding, killing, drugging, and live baiting greyhounds on a massive scale. The question now is, what can we do to shut greyhound racing down? And urgently today, what can we do to stop this track from being built? So I'll reiterate a few things that Shay said, but I'll just say it again just in case you missed any of them. So contact the Ipswich councillors with the facts about greyhound racing. And if you need any data, I've got lots of it for you. Contact the state MPs and voice your concerns. Talk to people who are running as councillors in the lead up and after council elections. And talk to people in the community and build support in the track instead of using the money in the area for more positive community benefit. And this will really be key, reaching out to the community in and around Ipswich to get them involved. And finally, contact your local state politicians and tell them in 2020, it is not acceptable to be inflicting cruelty on animals in the name of entertainment and profit. We do not want taxpayer money supporting this cruel industry. Thank you. So just so you know, if you want to sign up, we have a free e-magazine called Greyhound Life Matters on our website for the Coalition of the Protection of Greyhounds. We publish that quarterly. We also have newsletter updates so we can keep you informed. I have a sign-up sheet over at the Animal Liberation Queensland table there, so if you want to sign up, you can subscribe to our newsletter. So now it is my pleasure to introduce